welcome back to the Waiting Podcast. If you are new to this, listening for the first time, my name is Aaron. I'm the college pastor at Grace Community Church here in Tempe, Arizona. Really excited about this episode. Got two people I consider myself to be pretty close to. But we're going to talk about some interesting things today when it comes to the walk of the Christian life, but more specifically to how we were raised, and then also how these guys are growing in their faith right now and as young men. So two people here. They're going to introduce themselves real quick, tell them who you are, what you're doing with your life right now, maybe some fun facts, whatever you want to do. We'll go this way first.
Mm-hmm. Is that the camera?
You don't have to look at the camera.
I was just asking.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm Joel, also known as Aaron's younger brother. I'm 24, engaged man.
Engaged. When's the wedding?
February
February
21st.
21st.
I work 2 jobs. Work at a gym as a trainer and a barista at a coffee shop.
Let's go.
And that's kind of me right now.
College grad?
College grad GCU 2022 is when I graduated.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, my name is Brad. I grew up, as we'll talk about today, not in a Christian home, but ended up getting saved here at Grace about a little less than a year and a half ago. But I grew up in Washington State, a little town called Vancouver, Washington, that is right above Portland, Oregon, but it kind of creeps into Washington up there. And so I was there most of my life, played college basketball, took kind of an orthodox route to get to GCU, and played 2 years of college, and then took a year off, moved down to Arizona, and now I'm finishing up at GCU, and just had a lot of cool opportunity in the church, and love leading here at Unified. And I worked at LA Fitness full time as a manager there, and now I'm just there kind of part time, getting myself through school, and yeah.
Now you're just killing everyone at pickup basketball here.
Now I'm just a washed up kid that shows up to church hoops. And
Wait, I didn't even realize when you said that. 2 ex-college athletes in the room.
mm,
Yes.
Joel, you didn't hit on that. Joel did college track.
Track.
I didn't even know that.
That's
You
if
didn't know that?
Yeah, I
That's
didn't
if
know that.
that's
No,
if
I
community
didn't know.
college counts.
Yeah,
So
I
I'll
went
count.
junior college too. Yeah.
JUCO
Still out
athletes. There you go.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, events you had 4 and 8 or just
4,
8?
8 mile, 2 mile.
Yep. I wasn't a college athlete. I got a star as
Still a pickup legend though.
pickup legend here in Tempe, in the trenches, they call it. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Yeah, I wanted to bring these two on because they're both vastly different in a lot of ways of how they were raised. I am too, but seem to be on similar paths right now, which is really cool. Obviously, I know Joel really well, being my brother, and I know how he was raised, but we're going to talk about that. And then Brad, I don't know deeply much about how you were raised, but what people would know is if someone who's always been following Jesus for not even 2 years, your spiritual maturity is a lot higher than most. And we're going to talk about reasonings for why you believe that to be so. But it's cool. It's cool to see a friendship here because they're also roommates.
Yeah.
As of a couple
The
months
Pound.
ago.
Yeah,
The
the
Pound
Pound.
is the house in Tempe. But it's cool to see two people who are really close friends who were raised completely different. And because that's kind of unique in a sense when it comes to the Christian life, because people like you could easily be like, oh, I'm not at the same quote unquote, it's a wrong way to say, a same level as Joel in his walk with Jesus. It seems like you're in similar paths, similar things, so it's really cool. But yeah, we're going to briefly hit on the differences of growing up in a Christian home. Me and Joel were, Brad was not. I'll hit on it real quick for me, and then Joel can tell his experience. For me, my experience of being a pastor's kid specifically was a really good experience, which I'm really thankful for, because not many pastors' kids say the same thing. You know, you have that dreaded joke all the time. You're like, oh, I'm a pastor's kid, and you're like, I made it out. But I think it's real. I read a quote that said, I think pastors' kids leave the faith because all that they know of the church is that it took their dad away from them. And so I think why it was a good experience for me mostly. Obviously, there was times where it was hard, but mostly it was a good experience was because my dad, that just did not never feel like that was the case at all. Always very present, would always make it clear to myself, my siblings, and my mom if he would never sacrifice his family on the altar of ministry, that we were more important. And also it was a great experience because he just involved us all the time.
Yeah.
Like when we say we were raised in the church, it was like, no, we were actually raised there. Like we were there all the time.
Yeah.
My dad was a youth pastor the majority of my like childhood, and we were going to all the camps. My mom would have us in the back of the room during the late night services, sleeping on a blanket. The older like college age kids or high school age kids would like take Joel and Zach when they were little ones and like help and like let them like prank all the other students' rooms with them and stuff like that. It was just, so it was like a really good experience, and I think it was because, not just because I know people who have had good experiences being pastors' kids that are not in the same thing, but for me, I think it was good because all the kind of students and young people my parents were pastoring growing up weren't the cliche Christian kids. And so we were able to see that, wait, this isn't weird. Wait, this isn't like this forced, weird cultural thing, because we didn't grow up in Christian culture. So I think that's where we were favored too. If it wasn't just, oh, I was raised in the church in a majority Christian country where it's normal, and then once I graduate high school, I'm going to go off the deep end. Like we kind of been raised in a way that we couldn't be that. Like we either had to be like all the way Christian, even as young kids, or not at all. So I think that's why I had a good experience, and we could say a lot to it, but a lot of it, I believe, is because of my parents just led us as kids really well. Joel, hit on your experience real quick.
Yeah, it was great. It was a good experience. I think, and I was talking to Colin, he's actually been on this podcast a few episodes ago, but also one of our roommates about this, because it unified you over summer. You kept asking the question of like, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you believe in Jesus? And I think the more, and Colin and I were thinking about it a lot, and we always said, because it's kind of like a why not posture is why we believe. And I think a big part of it is how I was raised and the people that it's consistently given me, even though that's changed, like who those people are. It's the people it's given me. It's the opportunities and the memories and the moments that it's given me since like day one, since I was born. Like I've always been surrounded by and helped by his people, and they got me through hard patches. And so I would say probably in the moment when I was younger, I wished I wasn't a pastor's kid, but I do think does give me that posture of I believe in Jesus, because there's too many reasons not to.
Yeah.
And it starts with how like I was raised and the people it's given me and all of that stuff. But it was good. It was still hard though when I was little to, especially in England, telling people like what our parents did, because it just was so out of the normal. And it's very common to be like guys to talk about what their dad does for work or stuff like that. And there was just no relation I could give them with whether you're talking about business stuff, if this is what my dad's doing or anything like that, or this is what my mom's doing. I'm like,
yeah, there's never a same moment.
There's not. I
I
cannot relate to you at all. But I loved how very open our parents were to who we spent our time around.
Yeah.
And they were very welcoming to everybody, and it just helped that situation of me, although I felt different, and to all those people, it was still, they're not the enemy. There are people. Someone just screamed.
Scream. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I think my like thing growing up where like I would, like he was saying, our parents were very encouraging to be around and be friends with people who weren't the same as us. And so my thing of always like if I've been friends with a guy for longer than a month, I was always like, all right, when can I get him to church? And it wasn't because I felt like that's what you do. I really was just like, this is just what I really want to do. And my first like initial thing to get them involved with Christianity wasn't, oh, I'm going to get them to church right away. It was, I'm going to get them around my house, which is crazy looking back that was what my instinct was. It wasn't my parents taught us that. That was my, like, I was like, if I can just get them around my house and around my family, I think they would then be open to come into our church. And that's changed how I'm going to be as a parent. I want Eleanor and I to be like parents for our kids, that they would desire for their friends to be around us, and not just because they're meant to, but because they know they'll be loved by us and received in a really great way. And so a lot of my friends in high school in England were actually, I would say like the majority, I'd say 95% of my friends were part of divorced parents. And so like, I just think of one all the time, my friend Connor, who comes out here all the time. My initial thing with him was, yeah, I'm just going to get him around my parents. And once we got him around the house, he just felt so like wanted and felt so desired there by my parents, that he gained a really good relationship with my mom, but then also a really close relationship with my dad, and then was like a big brother to Joel and Zach. And so I think that changed it for me, of instead of it being, oh, I'm going to get them around church, but if they see my family life is really weird, maybe they won't want to be a Christian. I was always like, maybe they'll want to be Christians when they see how my family lives. Yeah. So I was really, really thankful for that. Brad, give us your experience. It's going to be wildly different to that. But
yeah, wildly different.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have different childhoods, because if you're, putting in the branch of Christian versus non-Christian, there's so many branches of non-Christian. And I think, like you said, there's a lot of differences in even people that were raised in the church and the experience that they had, for sure. I think my parents were divorced when I was in 5th grade. So, wow. I think, a lot of my childhood, I was always really shy. I was always really introverted. I was always,
How many siblings do you have? Sorry.
So I have an older sister, and then I have a half brother on my mom's side. So he's older. He's about 30. So I'm the youngest in the group. So they were more probably aware of, when my parents split up and stuff. But I think there was a lot of, my parents were always very loving. My mom, when we grew up, I think she was raised a little bit in the church, but both my parents had, some just like tough childhood and stuff like that. So, we were told, if somebody asks you what your religion is, we believe in the principles of Christianity, but, we're not in the church. We don't believe the rules. We don't really do that. But I think, I was really lucky, because I think there's a lot of kids that didn't grow up with any foundation on that. My parents were always very, tolerant and loving, and I never felt, judged by them for anything. So they definitely lived out the principles. I think everybody knows the invisible qualities of God and can understand that. But what my foundation really was a lot of sports and growing up in basketball, and I think that helped keep me accountable. I also think in elementary, I was so shy and reserved for most of my life. I think having teammates and stuff like that really brought me up until I really broke out of my shell and around like senior year of high school. One thing that I think it does allow, and for my sake it was good, but for I think others, they fall down the wrong path, was just a lot of curiosity. And for much of my life I wasn't curious. I was just playing basketball, and it is the way that it is. I'm going back and forth between houses and growing up and just doing the right thing with basketball. And I always feel like I had a good head on my shoulders there. I was always a nice kid. But, I think some families are, when they have that freedom and they don't really know right and wrong, they take that curiosity and they end up kind of in bad positions. So I was really lucky. I had a lot of great coaches. I had a lot of great teammates and families around me that helped, kind of build my moral compass even without Christ. But I think around senior year, I really started getting curious. My family would probably identify as agnostic. So we were never, committed to atheism or, didn't have anything like that. But, and we were never judged for exploring, which I think is, but I think every human has a yearning for understanding that. And so, I went down that path, and I think that prepared me for Christ. But I think eventually the freedom, when I got into college, it just runs out. You're getting so many conflicting opinions. I was in college during COVID, and I think for a long time I was able to say that I had a good, head on my shoulders, and then just kind of drifted away from whatever truth. And you got to that point where, you needed a foundation that you could really rely on that wasn't going to have, conflicting viewpoints, or, just something I can look to and rely on and be encouraged by. And, I will say growing up, you get what society tells you about the church and society tells you about Jesus, and probably honestly similar to what you hear when you're talking about being a pastor's son, which is, oh, what about the rules and the judgment and the, kind of legalism that you think about. And that's what I understood. I mean, I even went to my freshman year of college. It was a small Christian school, and I just did not fit in at all. I saw kind of people as honestly kind of closed-minded, and, a lot of people are exploring there that identify as Christians that maybe aren't doing the right thing, and they're doing their curiosity for the first little bit. And so, I mean, I transferred out kind of being like, oh, that's not for me at all. But, I ended up having a friend who kind of walked me through things, opened my heart up, and then obviously, God kind of did the rest. But definitely different. I think I'm really grateful. I mean, we were talking about a little bit about wise counsel and stuff, and I think I'm really grateful for a lot of the coaches I had. And my dad obviously pushed me and to be good at basketball, but he was always loving, always accepting. And my mom is just, the most gracious person I know. So, I was raised on good values and morals, but definitely different than I think you get in the
What
church.
would you say, because I heard you say in that, you weren't raised necessarily Christian, it was more agnostic, but you said you always had you gained a moral compass.
Mm-hmm.
What was it?
I mean, thinking of sports and stuff, I think that I don't know how I learned this. I think it was modeled by my parents, but I think I was always a nice kid. I was always pretty, obedient in school. I was never in detention. I was always early, on time to class. And I also think I had the accountability of, every day I had practice the next day. In high school, I couldn't go out and be with the people who are, doing the wrong things. And, I've always been, since I'm, was really shy and introverted, I think I was pretty observant, and I think I saw some, people that just weren't treating it. And I was pretty naive, honestly, much of my life, even, of just how, people go down the wrong path and treat others and stuff like that. So I think it was I give a lot of the credit to my parents, just modeling it, always being tolerant with people, always treating others nicely. So, but I think, again, I got to college and I just found myself, even though maybe I knew what the right thing was, I wasn't, following it as closely. But I think sports, again, I had accountability of, I had to show up to practice. And obviously, in college and high school, it's if you're out late, you're not performing the next day. And that was something that I had as a purpose growing up that really helped me do the right thing and build a work ethic and, treat my teammates nicely and, respect my coaches and respect authority kind of thing.
Yeah, so basically your way of living, moral compass was, I know what I have to do to get this result.
Yeah.
And I'll do it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a really, it's kind of a refreshing story to hear, because I think a lot of this age, college student age, Christian, they only think of testimony of people who weren't raised Christian, to that they were just in this horrible situation all the time, and then come to Jesus. That's true for a lot of people, but it's refreshing to know that you were raised in a good way by good parents. Yeah, they would split when you were a young person, but you feel like you were raised well by two loving parents, had a good family, and then life circumstances led you to, even within that, you see that you need God, which shows the essence of God, really. It's that people don't just suddenly stroll upon God because they're having a horrible life. It's you stroll upon God because even if you're having what's seen as a good, normal life in this country, there's what you were having, you still came upon God and that you needed Him. And so that's it's really cool. And I think we just need Christians who have grown up in a Christian bubble to experience that just because they don't know Christ doesn't mean, one, that they're so different to you. Yeah. Right? And that a lot of them just don't know.
Yeah.
Or don't know that there's something else.
But
wanted to hit, unless you have anything else to add to that.
Well, yeah, it's You said when you were around like that school where you just felt like left out, you saw those Christians as like closed-minded. And I think it's like good for the believer to hear that, because I think one reason why, although we have only known each other for like a year or two and were raised completely different until a year ago, why we like connect on certain things is, as much as we were raised in a Christian household, like pastors' kids, we weren't really ever around the Christian people except for on like Sundays.
Yeah.
And that was about it. And then, so I think it is good for the Christian person to hear that sometimes we can come off closed-minded.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't need somebody to tell them what they think, but they do need somebody to be like, I think you're actually listening to me.
Yeah.
With how I view the world. Whether you think that they're wrong or right, whatever it is, but sometimes just like some ears to listen to and have a genuine conversation and not be closed-minded. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think anytime I had, Christians, and honestly, I didn't talk really closely with a lot of Christians who are open about their faith, but from what I heard when you hear the gospel from somebody who, arguably had a good life, like I was playing basketball, I was,
Right.
And your labeling is like, oh, you're bad, you're this, you're kind of, and like, what, like, I don't really feel that right now. Like, there were things that I felt like I was lacking in, maybe had self-awareness about, but you got to know where they're at. I think, especially with like the evangelism and, like I said, I had a friend that I ended up moving in with who really was there for me. And most of the time, he was listening first and then he would throw in scripture. And I was like, oh, it says that in the Bible? Like, really? Like, those are kind of thoughts I'm already having. Brings it back. He explained things through me. But, most of the time at the end of it, it was positive. It wasn't like I need to, necessarily need to be saved. You're doing everything wrong. Like, honestly, he rewarded the fact that I was curious and I was thinking about God. The worst people to evangelize to are the ones that don't really care, or like kind of apathetic about it. Like, oh, there may be something, maybe not. But I think I was definitely curious, and he helped me know the truth that way. But at the end of it, I mean, he would just always go, I really believe God has a plan for you. Like, I can't wait to see what God does in your life. Like, things like that are encouraging and not labeling like, hey, maybe you're, I saw things that were going wrong at that point in my life, but he didn't point those out to me. He pointed out to the hope that I could have, and then continue to, not take pride in what he was doing, even though he was helping me, immeasurably. But he was just like, I can't wait for God to have a plan for you, and I can't wait to see what he does in your life. And then, God really did. And so, I credit that a lot, and I think he did it the right way.
Yeah. I think a bubble is, the Christian bubble is cliche, but a bubble is the best way to phrase it. Like, I think of, I watched the documentary a couple of years after the NBA bubble happened.
Yeah.
And I think it was Kevin Durant at the time, or maybe it was LeBron. One of them was like talking about it, and he was like, the craziest part was, yeah, the NBA bubble was this whole thing, and like it was weird, and there was weird things happening. And he was like, but being in that bubble, like while I was there, I forgot what was happening to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
That's what a bubble is, right? It's that you're so invested in just what is surrounding you, where those NBA players, all they had to think about was, yeah, there's some weird rules with this whole COVID thing, but I'm staying in the same resort with all the other players. I'm going to the same building to play the games, same building, like all this, and I'm only around the people who are doing the exact same thing as me. That's a bubble.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're in that, you forget that there's actually another kind of life out there. And and the other kind of life is people like how you were raised. But if you're in a bubble, you think anyone outside of the bubble is so polar opposite to me. That's not the case. They've just not seen this one that you're now living. And so that's a really refreshing testimony, really, because I think will be refreshing to people listening of a lot of Christians who have come into faith, like maybe end of high school, early college, wrestle with that. I don't have a good testimony. I don't have the one like the other people where I went so far off the deep end, as they call it, and then suddenly found God. Hearing yours is like just as beautiful to me, because it's like, I was living a life that maybe from face value didn't look like I needed something else. I wasn't falling apart or anything like that, but still God would show himself to me. So I just think that's really cool. But
I mean, I ended up going off a little bit. Like, I think by the time I,
Yeah.
like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, when I say, like, those, you know, my first 2 years of college, you know, I was really headed on the right track. And I felt like,
Yeah.
you know, especially, you know, by the world standards, and I was, you know, pretty happy and fulfilled and thought I had, you know, some purpose. But the thing is it's not sustainable. It's like you can do it for a
Gotcha.
little bit. You can have similar habits and you can feel good about things. But, you know, a storm's going to hit and you're going to, like, what are you relying on? And, you know, I think it got to the point where, you know, I was reaching for things that I, you know, as a child I wouldn't have done. I was around the wrong people. And, you know, by the time it came to the testimony, I mean, you know, I was not doing great. So, but I think the upbringing, I think especially helped with my maturity afterward and the growth that happened after that. Once I was in the church, I think it really prepared me for it.
Yeah, I didn't know the majority of that story, which is now explaining a lot to me of how you're suddenly a really mature man of God, and it does credit a lot to how you were raised, which is like really cool to hear. Joel, you had something else you wanted to hit on within this. When you hit on it a little bit, talking about wise counsel, but yeah, you said you guys were talking about it.
Yeah, when you asked like Brad and I to be on here and like any topics we could think of, so we're like leading a Bible study right now, but we're just going through Proverbs and we're really just talking about wisdom and discernment and wise counsel. And what we found is like reading Proverbs slow is really good, and slowing down. We're going a chapter at a time, but we're also going like 4 verses at a time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Brad and I really connect on this, and because of the people we've been given through the church, and around the topic of discernment and wisdom, and what does that look like practically? Because I feel like those are 2 words that seem spiritual and hidden almost, but how you act practically does show as well what you've learned from those things and what they actually look like in life. But we've enjoyed talking about it and talking to other people on it, but I don't know where you want to go with those or like what we've learned, but yeah,
I want to hear what you guys actually would define good, wise counsel to be, because like especially I mean, as someone who pastors college students, and you guys are leading college students, it's just because someone is seen as a wise voice amongst many doesn't mean it's a wise voice to your life specifically.
Yeah.
The reason I speak that is
yeah,
like the guy from me growing up who still is, like, was like the wise counsel in my life outside of my parents, was this guy that was not like the like extravagant guy to look at that everyone wanted to be around, right? But it was a guy who had been through a lot in his life that cared enough to want to be around me as a 14-year-old boy once a week on the Tuesday, and do that for then what turned into like 4 years straight. We never missed a Tuesday. So
we landed on basically wisdom and discernment as much as they're inner things. They're both like actions, and we even talked about today how discernment is like the end product, but discerning is like the action you take before that. And in terms of like wise counsel, like we were talking about how it's okay to have different people for different things.
so true.
But it's so easy to just go for somebody who is going to say the nice things, or is just wants to talk, or is just there, so you may as well ask him if it's on your mind. But it goes both ways of who you ask for wise counsel and when to give it.
Yeah.
And on if somebody, and I think in the college world, to touch on that, is just so many people want a voice, and so many people are surrounded by you, and good people, whether you're in the church or not. There's people are learning in that stage of life, so they think they have things to say, so it makes sense. But it's wise counsel like starts with like humility, whether you want to receive it or give it. And so like from the given standpoint, it's what I don't think people talk about or think about often is a friend comes to you and asks you advice on something, and you really have no experience on this topic, but they're talking to you because you're there, sat next to them or whatever. It takes humility, but also wisdom in being like, honestly, I don't know what to tell you to help you. Pray for them, whatever that is, but direct them to somebody who does.
Yeah.
Is way more loving and helpful to that friend than you just
yapping.
pulling something from anywhere and just yapping and just talking and saying something. Maybe it makes you feel good, whatever that is, or because it's right then and there, it felt like the right thing to do and they're asking you. So that's like on the giving end of wise counsel. And then when you're trying to receive it, it's also common sense. You're not going to go ask necessarily a single person what marriage is like. You're not going to go ask a scientist on something completely opposite of science on a car question or anything like that, because it doesn't make sense. But sometimes going to the right person hurts because you know what they're going to say. And so I just think it takes a lot of humility, but that's kind of what we touched on in our Bible study, like wise counsel, but we talked a lot about discernment as well, which I think we go into, but yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I think going off wise counsel, I mean, I had talked to some people who are always like, you should have people always ahead of you. You should also have people that you're leading, and you should have people beside you all the time. And growing up, I think, like I said, I'll give a lot of credit to my coaches and my family, and they really got me curious, and they were a means for me being curious about all things. I mean, especially basketball. I mean, I was a 5'2" kid that was playing against these dudes who were dunking in like 6th grade. And I think that, I had resources that I could go and ask. And I think that there's just always a deeper level to things. And, I think when you're really trying to get, deep into things, whether it's faith or whether it's, relationships or whatever, I think that there's things that you can only do by experience or observation. I think being able to observe somebody who's been there before, kind of like a mentorship thing, not just situational, but just in life, there's things that you observe that you take. There's things that you can ask that you can take that are kind of on a deeper level. And I think that was one thing that, really helped me with my faith journey was, we got coffee a week after I showed up to Unified. And, he asked me, like, what do you know about the Bible? He was like, 1 out of 10. I was like, it's a 1. He's like, do you even know what a verse is? And I was like, I could kind of figure it out, but not really. And, he was ahead of me. And then now I'm at the point where, we're leading a Bible study, and there's people that, and honestly, leading others is a little bit for yourself as well. Like, there's things that we teach at the Bible study that I'm just thinking about that. But I think especially, you have to be careful, especially as you're growing. And, this for me as well in the faith is, I don't have all the answers. And, but I think other people asking you questions and coming to that is also revealing where you don't have knowledge and inspiring you to go seek it. And, I think, mentors like Erwin and, outside of it, your dad was talking at men's group about how he allowed other people to speak into your life as a kid. I think, especially when you're talking about parents, and probably for pastors especially, is, eventually there's a point in I feel like every kid's life where you kind of lose credibility with your parent, or the parents lose credibility, and you just don't want to hear them talking. And so, and I think if you're a pastor's kid and you start losing credibility and you want to go explore and you want to have that rebellious phase, like, you lose God in that too, because your dad is the reflection of God maybe. And so I think that your dad being able to be like, hey, I'm going to have other people that are walking the right way speak into my children's lives, so it's not always coming from me. I think that's probably a really valuable thing. And then same thing with me, with coaches. I was able to go, when I, felt like I didn't want to talk to my parents about it, I was able to have people who were walking that walk. But I think curiosity, is the foundation for a lot of things. And you should be asking, you should have people that you can ask questions about. And then I think giving advice, if it's not specific knowledge, you can always speak, scripture into somebody, or you can always speak about this should be your posture towards it. Like, I know that to be true, but I can't tell you whether or not to date that girl or not, or what to do with your car. But I can tell you, like, if somebody's car breaks down, I can tell them not to freak out. I can tell them to trust God. You know what I mean? That it's not spiritual warfare or something like that. So
that's the beautiful thing about the church though is what I'm hearing
Yeah.
Joel talk about. If you're in a church and you actually decide to invest in the community that's in your church, you're going to meet so many different kinds of wise people,
Mhm.
right? And part of Joel was hitting on it like it's if I don't know the answer to someone who's approached me to seek counsel on this, referring someone else, that is wisdom by doing that,
Yeah.
100%.
right? Because you know someone who could. That's wise that you don't feel like you just have to like talk. I think of wise counsel in I can go the more pastoral route, like spiritually. If the same mind that can tell you that you're worth nothing and you're the worst person, and the same mind that can tell you to make horrible decisions is the same mind that's telling you that God has told me this,
Mhm.
you should seek wise counsel from someone if you think God is telling you something.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a thing within college students right now, which is awesome, that a lot of them are like, feel like they have this confidence to be like, God told me this, God told me that. What if he's not?
Yeah.
You know, the part of having wise counsel is being able to run that by people, to be able to be like, let me discern this with you. Let's first actually run it through the Bible. Like, I don't know if that even sounds like something God would say, right? But then, and that's what I've had, which is I found to be so good that, right, you can go from one moment, your mind telling you to make a horrible decision, to the next, your mind telling you, I have full confidence in this, that God is calling me to this. I should still, even though that might be true, I should probably run that by somebody, right? Another example of that where I saw that in my dad felt full confidence that our family was meant to move from England to America. Like when they got offered it, he was like, no, I know God is like calling us to do that. But had humility and wisdom to be able to be like, but we're not going to give that decision to you yet until, one, my wife has received that too, and he sought out the wise counsel of other people to pray with him in it too. Yeah. That's wisdom. It's I think you're unwise and weaker than you think if you can just make decisions abruptly with no advice, no wise counsel. I don't think that's strong, right? I just talked about it this last Thursday. We talked about meekness. And that's basically what Joel was saying. Meekness is literally when I did like a bunch of research on it, all it was saying is that it's strength under control. It's knowing, should I add value here? Not I can add value, but should I? That's the question. Of not taking every opportunity just to like preach at someone, yap into someone's situation. Meekness is knowing when to provide strength and when not to. Yeah. That's all Jesus was.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
I think it's also like what you want to give yourself credit for, and like what you want to give God credit for. Like you were talking about how the whole like sometimes in life you can think that God's calling you to something, or God's calling you that something's going to happen, and maybe that thing never happens, or maybe you never get to that spot. Who are you going to give the blame to in that time? Are you going to think, well, I got to keep waiting because it's supposed to come. I'm going to keep ignoring all these other things in my life because God told me that's going to happen. Or is it wise to be like, I'm a human and I heard that wrong? I just think people give God the credit of maybe making a mistake and not themselves making a mistake first. Because obviously we've all fallen and we're weak. So I just think there's such a high chance that our thoughts take us somewhere that maybe it's not from God. Yep. And again, that takes humility, but I think it rubs me the wrong way when people are like, I'm just so confused because God called me to that. God told me that was going to happen. And I'm just like, I don't want to talk about God like that because you don't know.
Because now you're not seeing value in anything that is happening.
Yeah,
it's because you're just waiting for what you think is meant to come.
And that he's putting you through this torture of this waiting thing, but you could have just heard wrong.
Yeah.
Originally.
Well, I like the point that you just said too. I mean, that's one thing that, when I was doing research on just like the book of Proverbs, it talks about wisdom as this thing that's always there. Like it shouts from the streets and it's always there. And so if you walk into a situation that's ends up blowing up and it's negative, and you don't take any wisdom out of that, like you're doing it wrong, because it's always there and it's always ways to take it. You know, if you're going through a hard time and you're not searching for wisdom, you're not looking for it, that you can take out of it and help somebody that is going to go through that same thing, you know, like you just wasted that experience of life. And I think, you know, it does. It talks about, it says wisdom was there at the beginning. Like it's almost like this omnipresence. It talks about it with God. And, you know, I just think you're missing it out if you're like, oh, God told me this and it's not there. Oh, you know, what I'm taking from this is that God told me the wrong thing. It's like, no, there's so much more that you can actually take from it if you're really just willing to look and hold yourself accountable.
And what we talked about today, how it says in Proverbs, 2nd chapter of Proverbs, it talks about it being like silver and how precious wisdom is and knowledge and insight from him. And as much as you can gain the wisdom, it's very crucial and precious to keep it. And how you keep that is important, and holding it that high in your life. But it takes certain things to keep it. But do you treat it that way every day of, this is what I know, and this is how I'm, going to show it to others and give it to others. You got to take care of it as you're doing that. And also, how am I going to keep it in my life to treat it with respect and with care, like it's silver, is what it said in the verse. So it's just like, it's a very precious, sacred thing, is gaining wisdom and insight from him. And can be, when you lose it, it could feel detrimental and it could feel like everything's gone. But it's just, you just got to take care of the knowledge you know, and how you use your knowledge is important, with humility and with more wisdom. So you got to keep seeking it. But it's a very precious thing that I don't think people touch on a lot.
It's really good. Let's do, we'll each go. I'll go first, and then I'll close this out. Closing statements, and it's your closing statement with a piece of advice to a college student from what we just talked about. Mine will always be this, not always, but for this subject specifically, what I've just learned and what I've gained wisdom and knowledge in just in this conversation is, if you're a college student, like anyone listening, you have to be in a church. And that's not just coming from the pastor being like, find a church, come to my church. It's find a church where it's people, not just in the same walk of life as you, like you were saying, who have gone ahead of you. And be in an environment where you're forced to learn from people who might disagree with you or won't just be yes men, but also being around people not your age, to be able to learn that sometimes your perspective, because you're only running it by the people who are in the same boat as you, makes it seem way worse than it is. I found that when I've been around people older than me and I bring a situation, when I've been in the church and brought that to somebody, they just make me feel so human, to make me see this isn't as bad as you think. Like, it's going to be okay. And they say that because I was in a similar one, and then, it came to an end shortly after, and it's like, oh. But if you're only around people who are in the same thing as you, same season, same age, you're just going to think, I'm never going to get out of this, right? So that's my wise counsel piece of advice, is just join your local church, and join one that has multiple generations in it, where it has your own, where you have your own close-knit community, but then it also has people who have gone ahead of you, who are willing to speak into your life, and seek them out, even if you won't like their advice they're going to give you. That would be mine. What's yours?
I think it all comes back to just being curious about things. I think, especially college students, and I know just from taking a year off, I think it's easy to go through it and just get the surface level knowledge of everything and your faith. But I just would say, always be asking the deeper questions, and make sure you're asking the right people and getting around the right people. I think it's easy to not take responsibility, or it's easy to just do, you're kind of taught in college to just, get through the assignments that you need to get through. But I think there's really value in, the people you're around, and like you said, in the local church. I think if you're asking smart people the right questions, it takes you so far. I think that's one of the things that I've just always, wanted to do and be around people that are doing what I want to do, and then asking them, what's the deeper meaning of these things, and what are the little intricacies about, faith or helping others, or, when it was basketball, it was like, oh, just, somebody who's ahead of me, what are you doing? And being like, kind of just picking their brain all the time. And I think that, a lot of people can just go through the motions for a lot of it and not seek the wisdom that you have. And ultimately, the goal is to, share it and be around people and lead others. And, I think just the curiosity piece, and I think also being curious with others that don't think like you. You can learn something from everybody. Like I just said, like, there's wisdom all around you. Even people who are maybe lower status than you, there's things that you can learn. I think every time you evangelize to somebody who thinks something differently, there's something that they're thinking that you will grow in your faith by knowing what conclusions they're coming to and figuring out how it leads back to the truth. I don't think that, if they believe something different, they're at a starting point that you have the ability to, if you believe that it's the truth, like all roads will lead there. It's not something that you have to stop them in their tracks and retreat and say, stop thinking this. It's really giving them the right information, being curious and continuing to grow and ask them questions to open up so that you can provide the right information. And so I think that there's just a calling to go deeper with whatever it is, and, not just do a little extra, be a little more curious, and, not be afraid to take a different route. I went to 3 colleges and took a year off, and it taken me 5 years to graduate, but I think I've grown in maturity a lot just because, I've been willing to go outside of that normal path just to really seek wisdom and build kind of a foundation of that.
Great. It's good. Joel?
Yeah. I think my advice would be there's nothing wrong with slowing down and seeking a more quiet and simple lifestyle, and try not to view your life as I'm seeking success, but rather try to seek a clear mind, a more freer mind, and a content posture. With what's around us. Something that I've been learning the past year or so is being content, but slowing down and simplifying things, and be slow to speak, quick to listen, especially around people older than you and wiser than you. And just take the time, especially as a college student, to slow down. And it's never wrong to be the person who brings the wisdom, even though it might bother some people. But slow down, try to live a quiet life as best as you can that's glorifying him, and you'll feel much more content rather than seeking something that's not you and seeking success and whatever that is. Slow down, be slow to speak, quick to listen, and just freedom is much more greater than success, and especially worldly success. So seek that and be yourself. You don't need to, if you don't feel like you have many gifts as somebody else, or if they're not the same as somebody else, just be humble that God brought you on this earth for a reason, and if it looks different, that's okay. So just be content that he brought you here and with everything he's given you, and be grateful for that. And slow down.
Well, good stuff. I hope this episode was insightful and was a blessing to you who are listening. Shout out to Joel and Brad for being here, and send this to your friends if you need to learn about wise counsel and also learning how to burst your bubble a little bit. Let's get around people who are not like us and show them the wisdom that we've gained, and then as you're doing so, gain more wisdom from other people. But we'll see you in the next episode. This was Waiting. See you soon.
Nice.